Final presenter today is Kathleen Weathers, and she is a senior scientist and the G. Evelyn Hutchinson Chair at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies. She received her PhD from Rutgers University, and Kathy's interdisciplinary research program spans aquatic, airborne, and terrestrial processes. She is the co-chair of the Global Lake Ecological Observatory Network, an international research collaboration which aims to better understand and manage the world's lake. And freshwater salinization is a robust area of study within this network. And Kathy's going to be wrapping up all of these great concepts and ideas that we've been talking about.
Well, thanks, Carolyn, and thanks to all of you for hanging in there. My job is to not stand in the way of your lunch and to move us to the end of this program. And I thought I would do that by doing two things. One is just do a quick review of some of the kinds of things that we've heard, and some of them that are a little bit different, I think, than 10 years ago when we did this forum. And then, if we have time, I'd like to engage all of you for a minute in thinking about what might be useful for a report going forward, or for actions going forward to carry on with best management practices and understanding of salt in ecosystems. So I think we heard some of the recent science on salt in the environment, anywhere from lag times. Salt has lag times moving through the ecosystem, through the terrestrial ecosystem. That there are new trends in fresh waters that are a little bit surprising about salt accumulating in fresh waters. I'll show you a slide in just a minute, but Laura referred to it as well, that there's an impact of land use. We found that only 1% of impervious surface right next to freshwater systems, lakes and streams, can result in increasing trends in salt. Impacts on freshwater biota. There's a lot of new research looking at what salt does and how it interacts with aquatic organisms. And we also heard from Eli as well that there's some interest in the chemical interactions of salt and other compounds, other chemicals. This is just a figure, and actually I was happy to see Laura pull this out. This is from a group of Global Lakes early career scientists who looked at lakes that are in areas where there's winter, there's ice, there's salting, and found again that only 1% of impervious surface is an indicator for long-term trends of increasing salt in ecosystems. And that's within a 500-meter buffer. I think our best management practices usually have a much smaller buffer than that. So it's an important thing to know that placing salt close to fresh waters ends up in salt in these systems. This work actually comes out of RPI and some of the Lake George researchers as well, looking at road salt and its impacts on amphibians, on zooplankton, on organisms, again, in freshwater systems and aquatic systems. And increasingly, you're finding impacts at levels that are in at least the yellow zone, if not a little bit higher. From the management perspective, we heard all kinds of important advancements, I think. This is, Michael provided this to me before the talk and before he couldn't show up here, but Robert underscored a lot of these as well, that the New York State DOT, and we heard DOTs around the nation, really are committed to seeking and improving new technologies, educating, training, partnering, really importantly, I think, partnering with local and regional and national organizations. And the goal here, as we've heard all morning, is really to balance the stewardship, balance safe travel, safe roads with the environment. And there's a huge commitment to that. We heard from Dan that local initiatives and partnerships are absolutely crucial. And we heard this again from Eli as well, that this is the future in many ways of balancing the management and balancing the environmental impacts, understanding the environmental impacts. So he gave some examples of road salting leading to regional salinization, that park residents, municipalities, groups in the region are concerned, and they've taken on local initiatives, which have regional impacts as well. So this is another case of a committed group around a region that are building awareness and looking for solutions and extending those solutions beyond their local group. Again, from Eli, we just heard another example, maybe a little bit smaller in scope, in geographic scope, but very powerful about the way to the future of managing systems, of dealing with road salt, of dealing with safety and environment. And in this case, Eli was highlighting that communities, getting communities involved, not only in advocating, but collecting data, understanding data, and then engaging with managers. What Eli didn't say, I think, but was thinking about saying, and something near and dear to my heart as well, is that salt may also have an influence on the microbial populations in aquatic systems. And then from Stuart, we had a few wise reminders at the beginning and at the end of his talk, which are, again, get ahead of your trajectory, incredibly wise advice. Think slow. Again, another thing that I think we've learned over the last 10 years that we didn't know before, and especially the no bad guys, that we are all working together. It's really clear. We've heard many, many important examples of the ways in which people are working together for management and environment. And then from Laura, some great examples of embracing the best practices and new technology. And what I think is really important that's cut across all of these talks is talking about creating a culture, creating communities and creating a culture where innovation can happen, where communication can happen, where data can be shared, where weather predictions can be shared. I think is really important and a common theme. So I think there are many efforts. We've heard about many of them locally. We've heard about some of them nationally. I just wanted to point out that there are best practice efforts and communities that are growing all across the nation, and importantly in Canada as well, looking at best practices. This actually was a conference that happened last week in Minnesota. The topics are very much like this, and their meeting last year, or 2 years ago, resulted in a model snow and ice policy advisory committee. And so groups of people from a lot of different sectors who've gotten together and have built a framework for snow and ice management contractors. So what about here as we wind down? This is the survey that maybe about a third of you took before you came in. I just wanted to point out that we are a diverse group. There are about, 20% scientists here, about 25%, 23% interested citizens, municipal officials, and many other folks. And it's quite heartening to see this diversity of participants. And we would like to hear from you, actually. We'd like to hear from you on the survey, but we'd like to hear from you right now for a few minutes about what is it that you think would be really helpful for you as you move forward in terms of a report. I mean, that's one tangible way in which we will summarize what happened here and we'll look forward in terms of SALT. But what I'd really like for you to do is engage for just the next couple of minutes. Talk to the group of people next to you. Hopefully you don't know them. Talk about the top 1 to 3 things that you think should be included in a report, the ideas that would be most useful to you in whatever it is that you do or are interested in about SALT. So then we'll go around the room. We won't get to everyone, but we'll hear from you about what do you think the top 1 to 3 ideas would be, or issues would be, or areas of interest for such a report or for moving forward. Make sense? You have about 5 minutes. Talk to someone you don't know. Hi. Let's check in. Let's check in. Let's check in so you all can go to lunch. I love the fact that there has been so much conversation. So let's check in and let's hear some of your ideas. No promises that they'll end up in the report, but we'd love to hear your ideas about what are the next steps, what kinds of things would be useful to you in a road salt report or next activities. So when you give your 1 to 3, make them short and also say why you're here. Are you a DOT person? Are you a scientist? So, yes, please. Hey, one right down here. Wait for the mic. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Jim Deane. I'm a superintendent of highways in the town of Orangetown, which is the southern tip of New York State, west of the Hudson River. I really appreciate this. I was here 10 years ago. We've been very active in using sensible salting since the 70s. I like some of the ideas. I like the idea of community activists. We're actually members of the soil district in our county, and we've been doing that with stream investigation and bringing community scientists in. And we do have a Sparkhill Creek Watershed Association that we work with closely. The Highway Department does also. And I think a lot of people in our county have been working on reducing the use of salt as much as possible, but of course we're looking at it from what our responsibility is to keep people safe, but we're aware that there's public interest in issues. I think one of the things that you may want to focus on, and we've tried this ourselves, is to bring the private sector in. New York State DEC, and you mentioned it, Laura, has done a really good job of making municipalities comply. If you don't cover your salt, you have issues, you're going to wind up with a citation or at least a violation. And that's 10 years ago, I think everybody was covered up. The private contractors do not do that. They don't do it. They have big parking lots. They put the salt in the parking lot. Sometimes they'll throw a tarp over it. I have pictures from 10 years ago of a white stream 20 feet wide going right into the storm drains.
Great, thank you.
So
Private
trying to
sector.
protect our operation, we need to consider private operations too.
Absolutely. There's someone right here, and then, so Aaron, you want to go up there first?
Hi, Putnam County Highway. As a highway operator, we've always talked about minimizing the use of salt, not just from a financial perspective, but from a water quality perspective. In my short time with Putnam County, we've noticed increase in sodium levels in well and drinking water. It's affected our senior centers, and so we've had to address it through other means. Also, Putnam County is the largest water contributor to New York City, so we have a lot of regulations involved in that, but we haven't really addressed salt yet, and we had started looking at that through a lot of the techniques that New York State had talked about, but I think some of the key issues, again, goes back to user expectations. We have to get a grip on that or indicate that there are going to be a change in the level of service that we have to provide. If we're going to run into lawsuits and other costly issues such as that, we cannot reduce our level of service, and that requires us to apply salt. One of the key things I thought was really interesting in the first speaker who said, talked about targeted no salt areas. So we saw that by reducing salt in areas around water reservoirs might help keep the salt out of those water courses. Perhaps we could start targeting a reduction of salt usage in those areas, but that would have to be through legislation, probably through the DEP, and that would give us the legal right to do that. That was my thought.
Thank you. User expectations.
Town of Northeast CAC. alerting the public that their expectations during snow should be different. Maybe we need a jingle that kids sing to their parents about slowing down in snow, or it could be connected to Earth Day, and perhaps even in driver's education.
That's great. A jingle. Any other suggestions, thoughts, ideas? Yes.
Chris Novitskiy, Lake George Waterkeeper. I want to thank the Carey Institute for this meeting, and I think great ideas. I was sitting with a couple of practitioners here, and what I taking away kind of a model that we put together in our organization is partnership, innovation, and investment. And I think, and to get what Laura was talking about, maybe an ROI on return on investment on these improved practices, and to really get to the economics of it, because that's what we found through our environmental organization is the environment and the economy are the opposite sides of the same coin. So if we can look at an ROI on these practices.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Just really quick to answer that. On the Clearo's website, there is a cost-benefit tool that you can enter your information in for different tools or technologies that are out there, and it will calculate it for you. I'll show you how to get there.
Great. How about one more before we break? Over here.
On that issue of cost-benefit analysis, we need to consider the cost of water treatment as well. Thankfully, here in Dutchess, it seems that you're not quite up to the level where you're needing to regulate the drinking water quality. Unfortunately, in Rockland, we're there. We have one small water supplier that's now purchasing water from an alternate source, and we have a municipality that's being forced to look at reverse osmosis at a municipal level. So we're talking tens of millions of dollars. So increased cost of de-icing, may be minor compared to the cost of water treatment.
One more? Okay. Up here.
I'm interested, I work for Riverkeeper, and we have citizen science projects across the Hudson Valley. And I was up in Albany yesterday for the Environmental Protection Fund Lobby Day. And I was really, I'd be really interested in seeing policy recommendations at the, municipal, state, and even federal level to see if there are ways to help municipalities and counties and DOTs to fund these technology changes, whether it's with a quick burst of funding to buy a bunch of equipment, or whether it's a long-term solution to help them afford and make the jump and make it fast.
Great. That's a perfect place to end, I think. Again, please make out the survey. Thank you for spending your morning here, sharing your ideas. Thanks to the organizers, to Carolyn for emceeing, and go forth with less salt.